Hello again, my friends. We continue the course on a Jewish way in mourning. And this week we make a transition. Up until now, everything has been focused on kavod hamet, honoring and showing respect to the dead. But once the burial has been complete, then the focus of our attention turns to the mourner. In Hebrew, an avel. In plural, avelim. When I go into another synagogue where they don't know me, they ask me, "Are you an avel?" And I say yes, because I'm in the period of mourning for my mother. So how do we begin to focus our attention on the mourner, on nechum avelim? Well, we always ask those who were there at the cemetery to form the traditional lines of consolation. It's an old custom. And when the mourners pass through those lines, we say to the mourner or mourners words in Hebrew, Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch shar avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim, which means, may God comfort you among all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Now, as I understand those words, my interpretation is this. When we stand at the grave, and unfortunately too many of us have known that moment, we feel crushed by the weight of sadness. We feel depressed beyond words, and we feel somewhat singled out sometime. Why me? Why us? Why my loved one? And so when we walk back through the lines and we hear the words, may God comfort you among all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, the message is sent that we're not alone, that we're part of a community of mourners, that the sadness of that moment is unfortunately a sadness that is felt by a wide community of people. That's the way it always has been, and that is the way it always will be. In our mourning, we are not alone. So we return to our home. And there, of course, there is water at the door. Water so that we can wash our hands and symbolically purify ourselves. Why? Because there is this belief in our tradition that we don't want to have that connection with death. We want to leave death at the cemetery as we begin life once again, even if it's a life of Shiva for the next few days. The house has been prepared for Shiva. Mirrors are covered. They're covered because during the week of Shiva, we're not terribly concerned or preoccupied with how we look, how we appear. We're allowed some leeway during Shiva. We're not there to look our best. We're not there to entertain. We're there to be comforted. We're there to mourn and for others to come into our home understanding our feelings and to accept us as we are during that week of mourning. We light the Shiva candle. The Shiva candle which burns for 7 days because there is some sense in our tradition that the light, the nair, the candle of the Shiva candle, is symbolic of the soul of our deceased, the neshama, as we say in Hebrew. And it is our way of saying that even after death, the neshama of our loved one can still bring us light, and you know that's true. The neshama of our loved one, the soul and spirit of our loved one, does not die. That remains with us. It's a part of the air that we breathe. There's no blessing said when we light that candle. Maybe at best a personal meditation or reflection, an opportunity to just say to ourselves the words that we need to say as we begin Shiva. And there's a meal, of course, there's always a meal, but it's a special meal. In our tradition, it's called the Seudah Havra'ah, which means the meal of consolation. And by Jewish tradition, it's a meal that should be provided by extended family perhaps, friends, neighbors, members of the community. It's the tradition's way of saying that the community's responsibility is to take care of the mourner. Nichum avelim. Comforting the mourner also includes in making certain that we're taken care of, that we're fed, that things are taken care of in the home. It's considered an act of chesed, of kindness, to care for the mourners. It's something that we all can do, should do, because it's our way, our tradition's way of showing love and friendship for those in mourning. Many of you know that once we sit down in Shiva, we should not be wearing leather shoes. We put on slippers, we put on something that's not of leather, because leather comes to us through the death of an animal. And during Shiva, when we are suffering because of the pain of a death of a loved one, we don't want to symbolically display an insensitivity by wearing leather, which comes to us, as I said, through the death of an animal. We give up that creature comfort, put on our slippers, put on something not made of leather to show that we have that sensitivity. And along with that, we sit low, not necessarily on a box. It's not designed to hurt us, to cause us back pain. It's designed just to symbolically place us in a low position so that we can show to those who come in that we are low, our feelings are depressed. And that way in which we sit tells the story. Now I want to talk to you about the term Shiva. Shiva comes from the Hebrew word Sheva, which means 7. It is intended to be a 7-day period of mourning. I know that it's become common today to shorten or abbreviate the Shiva. Sometimes 3 days, sometimes more days, sometimes less days. But I want to advocate to you that we seriously consider following the tradition of Shiva as it was 7 days. You know why? Because our rabbis were so smart. They understood that the loss of a loved one is traumatic. It is physically and emotionally traumatic, and the body and soul need a time to heal. Sure, we can try to rush it, but our tradition is saying we were not constructed like machines. Machines can go on. We're supposed to give ourselves something of a buffer zone, the opportunity to allow ourselves to begin to work through the process of mourning. I know it can be draining, but it is important. There are times when we just shouldn't expect ourselves, and others shouldn't expect of us, that we can get right back into life after the death of a loved one. The best thing we do is give ourselves the dignity and the patience we need to quietly and carefully begin our healing. Shiva, I would hope we would refrain from shortening it. We can abbreviate the hours, make it a little bit more tolerable, and we can also, in some ways, conduct the Shiva in our homes differently. Keep it a little quiet. Let people come to you. Don't feel that you have to entertain people. Let people come over and talk with you quietly. That'll go a long way to making it a tolerable experience. Shiva should be a time to heal, and those who are coming to the house of Shiva should understand that and work with us in that process. My friends, I want to tell you, the name of God is sometimes spelled with 2 yuds. A yud stands for the word Yehudi, one Jew next to another Jew. And sometimes it's saying to us that God is found when one Jew just sits next to another Jew, quietly, giving a hand, holding a hand, and giving moral and loving support. Until next week, I wish you well.